Good afternoon, and welcome back to another episode of This Week in Sports, where we analyze the latest and greatest in all things sports. Alongside Janie Pearson and Ben Hayes, I'm Dave Hughes, and today we'll be talking about injury problems plaguing the Rangers, some other drama and milestones from the NHL, the good, the bad, and the ugly in the NBA. Let's start with the Rangers. Jesper Fast and Henrik Lundqvist recently injured for the Rangers. What does that mean for them, and how do they move forward as a team? Who fills those holes?
Well, I think that the loss of Jesper Fast is a lot more of a minor problem for the Rangers compared to the loss of Henrik Lundqvist, their starting goaltender. I think that Cam Talbot should be able to step up and fill the hole for Lundqvist while he is absent with his vascular injury for the next 3-ish weeks. Jesper Fast will be easier to be replaced with lower forwards like JT Miller and other like Dominic Moore. They'll be able to step up and produce those points for the Rangers.
Yeah, I agree with most of what Janie said. I think Fast being out for 2 to 3 weeks, I don't think that's a big deal at all. You know, he's had a decent rookie season, but I don't think has much of an impact on the Rangers. You know, if this was Rick Nash who's having an MVP type season, or even Kevin Kline, then yes, it'd be a huge deal. But since it's Fast, I really don't think it is. And since he's out, I think it gives some great time for some new people to get some quality ice time, and maybe when he comes back, it's even a building block for their playoff push. Lundqvist, on the other hand, I think that's a huge deal, because, you know, he's an amazing goaltender. And when I think about good goaltenders, I like to think if they're consistent. And, you know, it's so easy for a goalie to be, you know, streaky and go on runs where they can just save a lot. But, I mean, if you're in the NHL and you get paid millions of dollars to stop the puck from going into the net, you got to be pretty good at it. And Lundqvist, you know, he's really the model of consistency when it comes to goaltenders. And if you lose someone like that, it's a huge blow. And the Rangers just won't be the same team without him, I don't think.
So hitting on what Janie just said, and you with consistency, do you think Cam Talbot is the man for the job, or do you think they need to go and get someone else?
Well, I don't think the question is if he can do it, because I think he can. You know, his record right now is 5-5, and his stats are pretty similar to Lundqvist throughout this whole season. But I think the question is if he will be able to do it, and that I don't think he will. You know, now he's 2-2 since Lundqvist got hurt, and the one win that they had last night, he let in 4 goals. So I think the pressure could definitely get to him.
I think it's not so much the performance in net. I think it'll also require the Rangers' other forwards and defensemen to step up in front of Talbot in order for them to continue their success this season. They've been seeing a lot of, you know, offensive slumps this season from some top guys. A surprising one coming from Martin St. Louis, who's struggled to produce points the past several games. I think he's on a 13-game scoreless streak. But in contrast, it is very ironic because they have some really struggling forwards while they have Rick Nash, who's the top scorer in the league currently with 33 goals. So I think it's just going to have to be a team-wide effort to, you know, build together and, you know, be able to get through this time without Lundqvist.
Can the inconsistency just be blamed on the struggling offense, or can it be blamed on something else?
I mean, no, I think it can be blamed on the entire team because it's a team sport. I don't think the offense should be the only one that gets blamed for it. I think the defense needs to step up more, especially now that there's a backup goalie in that.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because the Rangers are in the Metropolitan Division, and it is such a tight division in the NHL. I don't think that they should be worried about whether or not they're going to make the playoffs. I still do think that they are going to make the playoffs. They're in relatively good position for that at the moment. I just think that they're just going to need to get through this tough time and make sure that everyone's healthy as they make that final entrance into the playoffs.
We hint on the injuries and offensive inconsistency with the Rangers. Now let's talk about how they're going to fare in the Metropolitan Division.
Well, the Metropolitan Division is so tight, and there's a lot of teams competing very closely with one another. But I think that the Rangers have secured a spot where they shouldn't be too worried about not making the playoffs. Yes, there may be some issues with seeding. They'll obviously want to try to get the highest seed possible so that they can play the lowest seed in the first round of the playoffs. But I think that they shouldn't be too worried about, you know, like they're not worrying about, oh man, are we going to fall into a wild card position? So I don't think that they should be too concerned.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, losing Fast, you know, he's tied for the 3rd worst plus-minus on the team, so that really doesn't matter. But losing Lundqvist, I feel like, you know, that obviously takes a much bigger toll. And I feel like the Islanders, the Penguins, and the Capitals, really, I don't think they're going to be able to catch them. That being said, I don't think that they drop out of a playoff spot. I think that they're still able to get that 4th seed in the Met, but we'll see.
So we talked about We just talked about the division. Let's talk about their upcoming schedule. They recently beat Toronto and the Bruins. Can they keep winning games with their upcoming schedule, or do you see them losing a couple or winning here and there?
Yeah, so they have had a lot of non-division games the past few days. They beat the Toronto Maple Leafs last night 5-4, obviously an Eastern Conference rival, but not in their Metropolitan Division. Upcoming next, they play the Colorado Avalanche tomorrow night in Denver, and also the Arizona Coyotes on Saturday. Those two games should be able to be wins for the Rangers if they play their style of hockey, because both the Avalanche and the Coyotes have faced some serious problems this season. That being said, I do think that the Rangers will be facing a lot more of a challenge coming up with the Islanders on the horizon. They have not yet won a game against the New York Islanders this season, and that's obviously a huge metropolitan rivalry. So I think that if they're able to continue to perform well in out-of-division games like they have been, they should be able to, maintain their record and do well.
All right. Looks like it's something in the water in New York, but let's hope for Casey Bryant's sake they turn things around. When we return, we will discuss other news surrounding the NHL and recent milestones set. Welcome back. This week, the NHL has been buzzing with drama and milestones. Let's start with the Vander Kane saga in Winnipeg. We all know this huge saga he has started in Winnipeg, but breaking news we recently got from our sources at ESPN, he has been traded to the Buffalo Sabres. Your thoughts? Is it finally over?
I think that it is finally over. He'll stay in Buffalo. I feel he came out with a quote when he just now after he's been traded that he wants to help rebuild the organization. He's really focused on that. Obviously, Buffalo has been a serious disappointment for the past several seasons. Last year, they got rid of a lot of their assets, including Ryan Miller and net, Steve Ott. With that big trade with the Blues, I think this is another big momentous trade for the Buffalo Sabres organization. I'm not sure how one player can change the entire course of the team, but I think that obviously he will be an improvement.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, going to Buffalo, I don't know why he would really want to do that, but he's saying all of the right things, and that's good for him. But I think it was partially his fault about how things went in Winnipeg. The meeting, that's on him. He needs to know where he has to be at all times, and that's really his fault. But his teammate throwing his tracksuit into the shower, that's just ridiculous. Why would you want to play with teammates like that?
Yeah, it's a little bit odd. He sort of always had this ego about him, and it's definitely flourished in the past couple of seasons. I remember there was an incident on Twitter where he had a message that was screenshotted by someone saying that he wanted to be traded to the Philadelphia Flyers. He's sort of just been involved in a lot of controversies, little things, nothing too major, but definitely an interesting player and an interesting character to have in a locker room.
Well, their recent game for the Jets, they beat the Minnesota Wild, and it just kind of shows how they could win without him, right? So how does Winnipeg go forward now without him?
I think it was more of like a lucky win, kind of. I really don't see them holding out Minnesota for that last spot, to be honest. But.
Honest answer.
It's really difficult in the Central Division that is such a competitive and talented division in the NHL. I would say it's the most challenging division in the NHL. With those, division rivalries, sometimes you get odd outcomes with Dustin Byfuglien scoring the overtime winning goal last night to defeat the Minnesota Wild. I would say that it has been remarkable how the Jets have stepped up in Evander Kane's absence, with him going out with that season-ending shoulder injury. So I would say, good on the Winnipeg Jets, but yeah, I don't know if they'll be able to, I don't know, it'll be interesting to see who gets that final position in the Central Division for the wild card spot.
In other news in the NHL, one of the most memorable Devils, Patrick Elias, he now has 400 goals and 600 assists, so altogether 1,000 points. Your thoughts? Or where does this mark him in all time for Devils history?
Well, he's the 82nd player to ever get 1,000 total points, so obviously that's a huge deal. And he's the fourth Devil to do that. But of those four, he took the longest to do so. So I don't think he's the best. I don't even know if he's top three, but he's definitely top four, I feel like, at least for point scores.
Yeah, I mean, for a player like Patrick Elias, he's 38 years old, been in the league for a very, very long time. So you have to respect that. And it is very, respectable that he has acquired all these points throughout his career. Anyone that scores 400 goals and tallies 1,000 points in their career should be able to, be rewarded and praised for their efforts. And, he's a class act. He's a good guy. He's, very supportive of the New Jersey organization. And I think that for those reasons, he'll go down in history as one of the, top 5 to 10 players in NHL or in New Jersey Devil history.
Speaking of history, another New Jersey Devils memory, the famous AARP line with Gomez and Jagr. Your thoughts on that? Will they be together at the end of the season? And how good are they?
I mean, it's a little bit strange that there's a line in the NHL that exists with a 38-year-old, a 35-year-old, and a 42-year-old all on one line. That's pretty crazy. I don't know how many other sports ever could acquire such a line. I think it's interesting how well they have performed this season, especially Jaromir Jagr. He just continues to impress me each season that goes by. He was playing with the Bruins a couple seasons ago, and it's like, oh, how is this guy playing in overtime games that are going to double, triple overtime, and he's still on the ice, and he's 40-something years old. So I really respect these players, and like we mentioned earlier with Elias, none of them have any really bad marks on their reputation. I don't know how certain I am about them staying together after this season, especially with Jagr. He's 42. I don't know if he's going to retire after this year. I'd like to see him maybe return to his home in Pittsburgh where it all started. I think that'd be kind of a cool end to his career.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's really remarkable seeing how this line has performed. And I would love to see them come back next year. I think it's really fun to watch, and I would love it, but I think Jagr, he's a really competitive guy. I feel like he will come back at least to hockey, if not to the Devils.
So let's kind of transition to tonight's game between the Red Wings and the Pittsburgh Penguins, Wednesday night rivalry. Who do you see coming out on top tonight, and who are the big players to watch tonight?
It's interesting that this is a rivalry. I have always associated the Detroit Red Wings as a Western Conference team. I'm still not used to them being in the Eastern Conference with the realignment. But obviously a big Eastern Conference matchup, two teams that are qualified for the playoffs currently. You have a little bit of an interesting goalie story coming out with Peter Mrazek, the Czech goalie who's serving for the Detroit Red Wings after Jimmy Howard has been out with a groin injury. So I think it'll be a good game for him to step up and show that he can play really well on national broadcast, in contrast with Marc-Andre Fleury.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, Marc-Andre Fleury, he's the most shutouts this season, but I feel like Mrazek steps up, and I'm going to pick the Red Wings to win this game 3-2.
3-2.
We all know that the Penguins have struggled recently, and they're only 4-3 since the All-Star break. Where do they go from here, and how do they kind of get out of that funk?
I mean, it's interesting because the Penguins, they're a very talented team, obviously, with players like Sidney Crosby, Evgeny Malkin. Like, you can't deny just the sheer talent that they have on the team. And they have made the playoffs for several number of years, the past several years. Haven't won a cup since 2009. They've struggled in the playoffs. They fired their coach, Dan Bylsma, after their last playoff exit last season. So I'm not sure if the new head coach will, be able to propel them through the playoffs. I personally am not Marc-Andre Fleury's biggest fan. I think he's kind of a flake, and he typically falls off the train really badly when it comes to the playoffs. I remember in 2010 when the Flyers and the Penguins were going at it, it was Marc-Andre Fleury in net for the Penguins and Ilya Bryzgalov in net for the Philadelphia Flyers, and we had scores like 8-7 in playoff games. So I'm going to need Marc-Andre Fleury to step up big time, and also their stars, Evgeny Malkin, Sidney Crosby.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, the past few years, it always seems like the Penguins are always there. But this year, I mean, it's just year after year, we feel like they have a chance, and this time I'm just going to say no. I really don't think Crosby and Malkin are enough to carry them, and so I obviously I still have them making the playoffs, but I don't think they're going to do much when they get there.
Welcome back. We're talking about the good, the bad, and the ugly in the NBA. Let's start with the good and coach for the Spurs, Greg Popovich. He is the 9th coach to win 1,000 games. Your thoughts, Ben Hayes?
Yeah, obviously 1,000 wins, that's huge, and I've always been a big fan of Coach Pop. But, I mean, people are saying now maybe he's the best coach of all time. That I definitely don't agree with. I'd say he's definitely top 10, and I'd say he's top 3 of this generation, with the other 2 being recently rehired George Karl, who's now in the Sacramento Kings as of yesterday, and Phil. You know, the coach's main job is to win championships. And, you know, Pop's won 6. That's huge. And the way he beat the Heat last year in June, the just dismantling of LeBron's team, it was ridiculous. I've never seen anything like that. It's the biggest coaching mismatch of all time, probably. But, you know, I mean, Phil Jackson, he's won 11 championships. And I know he had both Jordan and Kobe at 2 different times, you know, 2 of the best players of all time. But, you know, Pop's had some help, too. He's had Tim Duncan and Tony Parker and a lot of other Hall of Famers. So I don't think Phil having Kobe or MJ really matters that much. And, you know, also, Red Auerbach, you know, he won 9 championships, and he only coached for 20 years. He was a legend. And then, you know, obviously Don Nelson has the most wins of all time with 1,301. So to say Pop is the best coach of all time, I'd say no, but he's definitely up there.
I have to agree with you. I think that 1,000 games, 1,000 wins is huge. And, you know, I do agree with you. He has some help with Tim Duncan on the team, and it's not like he can, you know, be accredited for all of the team's success. He has some really talented players on his team. But you're right, defeating the Heat the way that they did, that's huge, and I think that he is going to be one of the best in this era. It's difficult to assess the greatest coach in history, but definitely one of the best that we've seen in the past several years.
Yeah, I mean, obviously it takes having great players to be a great coach, but the way that he recruited, you know, he drafted a lot of the players that he got in really like the end of the first round in each draft, and sometimes even like the beginning of the second round. So it wasn't like he was always getting players that were expected to be premier and all-stars, you know, other than Tim Duncan. Really, he was the only one. So he did a great job of that.
Let's continue with the good in the NBA and talk about the Hawks and the Warriors. The Hawks recently beat the Warriors. Does this mean they are the best team in the league?
You know, the Hawks are a great team, don't get me wrong, but I don't think they're anywhere near the best team in the league. I don't even think they're top 2 in the East. You know, they obviously have the best record in the league. You know, they have 10 losses. No one else can say that. But, you know, they've really come on the scene this year. They had a terrible season last year, and it's really, you know, Horford's healthy now. That's huge, and Kyle Korver's been having a great season. But I don't think that they're really fit to win playoff series. I think, you know, they could win their first-round game if they don't play Miami. I think if they play Charlotte, that's an easy win. I think they win in 5 or 6. But then the second round, they're playing either the Cleveland Cavaliers with LeBron, who have been hot lately, or, you know, the Washington Wizards with Wall, who's been amazing. You know, the Toronto Raptors, Kyle Lowry's starting the All-Star game this year, or the Chicago Bulls, who are my pick to face the Cavs in the Eastern Conference Finals. So I don't see them really going far. And, you know, yes, they did just beat the Golden State Warriors, but they played the best team in the league, in my opinion, on Sunday, and that was the Memphis Grizzlies. And they lost by 6. And, you know, Zebo and Marc Gasol, they beat up Millsap and they beat up Horford in the paint, and it was really no contest.
So what do the Hawks have to do to beat the Grizzlies if they face them again? Or how do they become the Grizzlies?
Well, I think that Horford just needs to step up. He needs to prove that he's still a premier player. You know, he's been hurt the past few seasons. He hasn't really been as healthy as he would have liked to have been. But when he's fully healthy, he's got to be one of the best centers in the game. So I think it's up to him.
Moving now from the good to the bad, let's hit on the Knicks and their terrible season so far.
Yeah, I mean, the Knicks are 10-42 currently, which is absolutely atrocious. I think it's just such a shame that they're such a bad, you know, the whole franchise is a mess because they have such a strong market to, you know, cater to. They're in New York, and they should be able to, you know, be a somewhat decent team. With Carmelo Anthony has been battling knee problems this season, but he's also just has a terrible attitude, in my opinion, and I just don't see them improving anytime soon.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think Mel's a cancer. I don't think any team can win a championship with him. But, you know, last season, the Knicks, you know, they were such a disappointment after being the 2 seed 2 seasons ago. And, you know, Tyson Chandler, he was battling back problems, and I think that they thought that the solution was to deal him. But really, that just completely backfired. He was one of the only things holding that team together. And now that he's gone, they really have nothing.
Can Okafor save the team? Can he save the New York Knicks?
I'd say no, because, I mean, I think he's going to be a great talent. I think he's similar to Anthony Davis when he came out a few years ago, and I know he wasn't amazing at first, but now he's one of the best players in the league. So I think if they draft him, I think that's definitely a smart move. But I don't think he's really a savior, especially with Melo still there for 3 more seasons.
So let's hit on the last point, the ugly, and in Jim Dolan versus the fans, I guess, in New York. What do you guys think about that?
I think it's ridiculous. Like, as an owner of a professional sports franchise, you can't call one of your fans an alcoholic. Like, that's just ridiculous. And the fact that he's not getting punished at all for that by Adam Silver, I think it's just not right. I mean, I think Silver needs to show that he's consistent. And if you remember last year, when Donald Sterling had those racist remarks, he got immediately banned from the NBA. And I know, like, obviously, that's a hot button topic, race issues, and this is not nearly as severe. But I mean, he didn't even say he did anything wrong. He said he got a bad email. He responded with a bad email. There's got to be more than that. I'm not saying he needs to be suspended, but maybe a fine, or at least say that he did something wrong. You know.
Yeah, I agree with you. It's absolutely preposterous that an owner of a professional sports team would make any kind of comment like that. There's no place for it. There's no excuse, and I think that he should be smacked with a fine. I'm not sure about being suspended, but I think a fine would be the best way to go.
Yeah, I agree.
Those are the end of our main topics for tonight. We're now going to go into our Speak Up segment to end the show.
The San Diego Padres have stayed hot this winter, and not just because of the beautiful weather in sunny Southern California. In a stunning array of moves, the former NL West bottom feeders have acquired some great talents from across the league. In fact, one could argue that they have completely taken over the spotlight of the MLB hot stove and have had the most productive offseason of any of the franchises in Major League Baseball. Most recently, San Diego has inked one of the biggest names in free agency this year, former Kansas City ace Big Game James Shields, to a 4-year deal worth somewhere between $72 million and $76 million. This makes the recently turned 34-year-old right-hander an $18.75 million man until he turns 38 years old. Other notable signings for the Padres this offseason include Will Middlebrooks, Dustin Norris, Justin Upton, and former Los Angeles Dodger Matt Kemp. However, San Diego also appears to be in discussions with the Philadelphia Phillies about acquiring highly sought-after left-handed pitcher Cole Hamels. While each and every one of these players is very talented and deserves recognition, the Padres are certainly not my pick to win the 2015 World Series. Even though they acquired several big-name players, there is still a possibility of imploding and becoming the laughingstock of the MLB. Again, Matt Kemp and perhaps catcher Derek Norris, all of San Diego's new additions to come from backgrounds of turmoil. And even Kemp is facing struggles despite coming off a significant bounce-back season. Shields, who was one of the top 3 free agents this offseason, is nowhere near as valuable as his 2 agent counterparts, Jon Lester and Max Scherzer. Shields, although still maintaining the nickname Big Game James, fell short in almost every single big game that he pitched in last postseason. Now that he's taking the helm of a Padres team that is now receiving a multitude of expectations, I do not think that Shields will be able to live up to the hype and will crack under the pressure. Justin Upton is a rare 5-tool talent that at times seems to be one of the best outfielders in baseball. However, after leaving his new in-division rival, the Arizona Diamondbacks, for the Atlanta Braves, Upton failed to produce the numbers that he'd once had. It appeared at times that the young star was uncomfortable playing for a new team, and joining a San Diego squad that has so many new faces will not benefit Upton whatsoever. All in all, this should be an interesting season for the San Diego Padres. If all the pieces fall together, then the Padres could definitely contend for the 2015 World Series, despite a tough NL West division. However, I say that they will not, and all this acclaim will result for disappointment in San Diego.
The 2014 United States Little League champions have been stripped of their title. The Chicago-based team, Jackie Robinson West, made history this past summer by becoming the first entirely African-American Little League team to win a United States championship. But reports surfaced this week that some of Jackie Robinson West's players were ineligible to play on this year's team due to boundary violations. Every Little League team in the United States is required to obtain its players from a certain geographic region. Jackie Robinson West's roster was composed of players who did not reside in the team's specific geographic area called Illinois District 4, which is a direct violation of the league's rules. As a result, the team has been stripped of its title and all tournament wins from the 2014 United States Championship Tournament. In addition, the team's manager, Darrell Butler, has been suspended from Little League activity. Illinois District 4's administrator, Mike Kelly, has also been removed from his position due to his activity in signing ineligible players to make the team's roster. This isn't the first time that Little League Baseball has dealt with a scandal in the months following a championship tournament. In 1992, a team from the Philippines was revoked of its championship title after players were revealed to be over age. Another team in 2001 from the Bronx also faced penalties and disqualification for having overage players on its roster. This scandal is a huge blow to Little League Baseball after the sport achieved national recognition and some of the highest television ratings it has ever had this past summer. Hopefully, the league will be able to right itself and continue increasing popularity with ethical rosters and players in the future.
You heard it here first, folks. QPR have done the impossible, picking up 3 points away from home. Having sacked legendary manager Harry Redknapp, many soccer fans and pundits have already ruled out QPR from staying in the league this season. Halfway through the EPL season already, QPR have only picked up 22 points and sit third from the bottom. Caretaker manager Chris Ramsey seems to have the R's on the right track, though, defeating Sunderland 2-0 on February 10th. It seems a wonder why Matt Phillips hasn't been able to get a lot of game time this season, after assisting on both of the goals in the match, swinging in 2 dangerous crosses from the right side of the pitch. And something of a surprise substitution with the infamous Sean Wright Phillips coming on in the 65th minute. Having not played league soccer for 5 months, he made little impact nonetheless, but it was good to see him back playing again. Will we see a more fluid QPR lineup in the months to come, or will we be more or less the same under previous manager Redknapp? The fans have done all they can for QPR. It's now time for the players to get them out of the relegation zone. Well, that's all the time we have for today. Tune in next week for the next episode of This Week in Sports. That's Janie Pearson, he's Ben Hayes, I'm Dave Hughes, and we're off.